Okay, good afternoon and welcome to The Living Marriage. We're doing the introduction today. This is a book called Binyan Abayis in Hebrew, Living Marriage in English, a journey into the heart of marriage. It deals with the most important part of marriage, as you guessed, marital intimacy. This is the introduction of the author. He starts by saying, he quotes from one of his rebbeim, Rav Shneur Kotler, one of the previous big Rosh Yeshiva in Lakewood, New Jersey, from Beis Medrash Kava. Why does the bride enter the chuppah? He brings a Gemara in Ksuvos. The Gemara says, everyone knows why a bride goes to the wedding canopy. Anyone who degrades his mouth by making a disrespectful remark, the Gemara says, Kol menav al piv v'motzi davar nevalim piv. If he does this, even if he receives the heavenly decree of 70 years of good life, it will all be turned to bad. It's talking about, some people when they go to a wedding or when they're discussing a wedding, what will it be like on the first night for the couple? They talk about these things and explicitly mention they're going to have sex tonight. So apparently the Gemara is saying that it's a terrible thing. So Rav Shneur Kotler learned from this Gemara is that a lot of people think, they question themselves. I know when I was going out, when I was dating, people were asking me, why do you want to get married? So the answer is, do you want to get married? If you're a frum person, you don't want to talk about marital intimacy, even though deep down in your heart that's why you want to get married, why a man wants to get married, and why a woman wants to get married. People say because they want to have kids, or as he brings over here, people think the whole point of marriage is to be able to do more chesed. Chesed is so valued, doing charitable work for other people, helping other people. You help your wife, the wife helps you. So there can't be any better chesed than that. Or you want to have Mekayim Mitzvah Puravu. I think that's what I said, Mekayim Mitzvah Puravu. But as he says, the Gemara makes very clear that everybody knows why Akala and why the woman gets married, right? Everybody knows the reason, but you're not supposed to speak about it. But the point that he's bringing from the Gemara is that everyone knows, and that is the point of marriage. The point of marriage, at least for the Kala, the Gemara says, for the woman, she wants to marry intimacy. For a man, right? According to modern day Jewish hashkafa, from hashkafa, you have to get married in order to experience sex or marital intimacy. In different sectors of Judaism, the more lenient sectors of Judaism, not everyone waits till they get married to lose their virginity. But if you're in, the Haredi sector or the ultra Orthodox sector, which I'm part of, you're not allowed to even touch a woman, or let alone even talk to a woman, until you start dating, and certainly you can't touch her until after you get married. I know personal offhand experiences when I got engaged. My rabbi told me that I shouldn't see my colleague even only once every 2 weeks. I should see her, because it might awaken in me a desire to touch her or to become intimate with her before the marriage. I've heard even people advising some Gedolim. We'll talk about Gedolim in a second, but they said it once every 3 weeks. The Chazon Ish, I think, said once every 3 weeks. The engagement period between the engagement period and the marriage, once every 3 weeks is the appropriate time to see the Kala, the woman, before you get married, unless you might come to do something which is usher, which is forbidden. But everyone agrees that's the reason that you get married. Now, he does point out that it's a little unique for a person who comes from the ultra-Orthodox or Haredi sector to open his mouth or open his pen and write a book like this, write a book which clearly is going to talk about things which are very private things. Anyone who goes into a Judaica store can just pick up this book and read it. When I picked it up and read it not many years ago, like 3-4 years ago, I was already married at that point. And there were a lot of people that weren't married that were opening this book and looking at it, and it's considered a breach of modesty. He just says he would think it's considered a breach of modesty to talk about these things in a public forum, putting your book on the shelves of a Judaica store, which anyone can look into and read it. It's a very dangerous thing. So he says that really, technically, you're right. We shouldn't be talking about this in public, but it's a haras shah. He says nowadays people are so disillusioned about the reason why they get married. People don't know why they get married. People think, as he says, there's a couple of different problems that challenges our generation, he says. He gives 6 challenges of our generation which make writing this book necessary. Um, One, he says, is a stuck fly syndrome. Um, he has the wrong idea of marriage, and he keeps on thinking that that's the right, even after he gets married, he keeps on thinking the wrong things, that the purpose of marriage is to do chesed, is not to create love, it's not to enjoy yourself in the bedroom, but it's to do chesed with the other person. I'm going to speak in a second about the concept of unity. Um, the author seems to think that marital intimacy, the real purpose of it is to create the highest form of unity between the couple. I'm going to talk about that in a second. He says also nowadays we have a desire for rest and laziness. People don't want to work on their marriage, so therefore one of the places they want to work on, it's true, the bedroom requires a lot of effort, right? Because most people with their naive thoughts about before they have sex, right? Before you have sex and after you have sex. Before you have sex, you think it's this wonderful thing and it's amazing, and it's just passion. But then and you're really enjoying it every second. You're enjoying it. And it's possible. It could be possible, but practically, when you start, when you get into the bedroom the first night of marriage, you realize that there's a lot of things that can go wrong. There's a lot of problems that could arise, um, both for the man and the woman. There's so many problems that could arise, and in order for it to be successful in the bedroom, you have to be willing to work. You have to be willing to work at the problems over there. You have to be open with each other, and it's hard that the first time you meet each other privately, it's in a bedroom, and you have barely a relationship with them. Again, you've only met them once every 2 weeks, and you've only been engaged for 6 weeks. So there's even rules about how often you can speak on the phone. But the point is, you barely know the person. If you didn't meet them before you started dating them, you dated 3 times, or you dated them 6 times in America, and then you're engaged for 6 weeks or 2 months, and then you're married, and you end up in the bedroom tonight after your wedding. It's hard to open up to the person, and could take a year or 2 years or 3 years before you're ready to engage in a meaningful conversation and tell people what you expect in the bedroom, what you're missing in the bedroom. Some people will remain mum about this for many years, their whole lives, if they're in a relationship where there's domestic abuse, verbal, sometimes physical. So that's the problem. There's also other specific problems, in the bedroom. We'll talk more about, when the man ejaculates and things like that. That could be a problem, a source of discomfort for the man and the woman. How long it lasts, the man can last in bed. That's one problem that happens a lot. Sometimes women don't feel comfortable. They won't do anything. They just lie there and the man's waiting for the woman to reciprocate the love. And I'm specifically talking about women from the Haredi ultra-Orthodox sector. He mentions this in the book. They'll just lay there. They won't participate, and the man wants them to participate. Sometimes the man won't do anything. And wait for the woman. A lot of men are weak. They're not really men. They're not really willing to do what they're supposed to do. Sometimes they're too aggressive the first night. I've heard stories, first night of marriage. I heard a first-hand account of someone personally. My wife knew that. The first night, guy from a yeshivish guy, right? He presumably never had sex before, never met a physical contact with a woman before. He did so much stuff on the first night. She was like horrified that he was so aggressive. There's a lot of different types of things you can do in the bedroom. People think it's just, vanilla sex, just, missionary position sex, and, go right into that. So people think that's all there is in the bedroom, but there's more. And apparently this guy, who was a yeshiva bachar, he knew a lot of stuff, and he was doing all this stuff to his kala, and she was grossed out the first time. Hello, treat me with respect. I'm a woman. You gotta treat my body with respect. Things he was doing to her, and she was horrified and traumatized. I don't know if she ever spoke up till this day about this, but she's probably in a relationship which needs a lot of therapy after it. And that's, because it's the most important part of a marriage, and it means the most both to the wife and to the husband, we have to be really careful over it. Again, he says the decay of the relationship. People don't want to build relationships anymore. He says, today's generation, the most basic building blocks of relationship are completely misunderstood and underdeveloped, resulting in devastating results in marriage. Many people cannot comprehend what possible connection there could be between virtuous intellectual people and the fleeting emotion of love, especially in the ultra-Orthodox sector, but also among intellectuals in the regular world. If you're an intellectual, how could you do this base thing of being together? It's like an animal over here. How is that really relevant to love? No, they conclude that feelings of love are fitting for those who have not been blessed with intellect. If you're a smart person, you're not a person who engages in marital intimacy or enjoys it. You have to think about holy things like the Torah or intellectual knowledge. If one of these people would be asked if the Stipler loved his wife, this is interesting. He writes this: the Stipler was one of the Megadolim. They wouldn't know what to answer, and if they pushed, they would probably say probably not. This mistake is so fun. Of course, Stipler loved his wife. Did he? I don't know. I mean, I would say probably not. Not that I know the Stipler, but I'm just making a generalization from the lives of Gedolim. We talked about that more in the real me. But so he talks about that, misunderstanding marriage, like I mentioned before, misunderstanding tznius and kedusha. This is number 5. He mentions over here. Tznius generally means modesty. We think modesty is relevant to how a woman dresses, and kedusha means separation from physicality. That's what people think, especially in the Jewish world. Like the Christian view of celibacy for priests and high-ranking members, the cardinals, and certainly the Pope has to be celibate. So that's what Christianity believes in. Judaism does not believe in. We believe kedusha is actually the opposite. It's enjoying the physical. That's what Mesilas Yesharim, one of the biggest classical Musar Sfarim, says. That kedusha is taking the physical and enjoying it, and knowing when to enjoy it, how to enjoy it. That's the real kedusha. Knowing how to enjoy something the most. It's exactly the opposite of what people think. People think kedusha is separation from physicality, but it's actually the opposite. It's enjoying the physical relationship the most. And then the last thing he mentions is called frumkeit, which I'm not going to go into what he talks about, but my first-hand experience with frumkeit is that people in the ultra-Orthodox sector try to be as different as possible in the regular society, because we basically cut off the regular society and say they're all wrong for everything they do. So we add chumras in halacha, chumras in the way we dress, and things like that. And one of those things, being different than the rest of the world. The rest of the world, usually the thing they enjoy the most in life is sex. So therefore you'll say being frum means I hate sex, or I'll try to have a little enjoyment of sex. And that can be devastating in a relationship. Because again, usually who's going to be more frum is the man is going to be more frum. Sometimes the woman could be more frum. Usually it's the man who's going to be more frum, and he's the one who's really in control of the sexual relationship. If he withholds what his wife needs, a lot of times a woman is not able to verbalize. Either she doesn't know what she needs, she can't consciously think of what she's missing, or she knows but she's afraid to speak it in front of her husband, afraid what her husband will say. This ruins the marriage. He says a general overview. There are 10 lessons in this book. He divides his book into 10 lessons, or 10 chapters. Each lesson has, three or four or five subcategories. I'm gonna each of the lessons, including the subcategory, I'm gonna call it chapter, just for simplicity. Instead of saying 1A, 1B, 1C, we'll just call it chapter 1, 2, or 3. If you actually look at the book, you'll realize that 1A is chapter 1, 1B is chapter 2, etc. He says you have to know all of the lessons together. I think as we go through the book, we'll see as the lessons build upon themselves. He brings in this introduction that he asked, the reason he got into this is because this rabbi asked the biggest rabbi to the generation. He had personal conversations with them whether they thought it was appropriate. This person had a lot of experience privately giving these lessons over as a to chasanim, to grooms who are about to get married, to tell them about these ideas about marital intimacy. He asked Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, was a big gadol of the previous generation, should he talk about it in public? When he asked him, when he first discussed his need for classes with Rav Shlomo Zalman, he immediately burst out in amazement. And Rav Shlomo Zalman said to them, he yelled at him, "Is this what we need to be talking about? Certainly anyone can understand this topic by himself." So at first he was pulling back. He got up to leave. Rav Shlomo Zalman pulled him back and he said, "Come back. No. What I meant was that everyone can understand that really, you're right. Really, everyone, like Rosh Neir Kotler said, we should understand these things by themselves. If we don't become too frum and too different than everybody else." Yes, everybody realizes the reason you get married is because you want to have sex. You want marital intimacy. The problem is that we don't think that way. We've skewed our way of thinking, that it's not important, and we even say it's something which is forbidden or disgusting. So we have to teach everybody. And he said, really, you should go around promulgating these ideas and telling everybody that it's important. That this is important to realize that it doesn't need. We shouldn't be talking about it. It's obvious, but the problem is not so obvious nowadays. Um, he said he asked Rav Moshe Feinstein, who also agreed that he should talk about it. Again, they gave them rules, and it comes out he talked to Rav Yashiv also, Rav Chaim Kanievsky, who was the big Gadol Dor until a couple of months ago when he passed away. He said, although you're allowed to talk about everything and anything, and he does talk about a lot of stuff in this book, there are two principles which must be guarded. Number one, only words of Torah may be discussed. When discussing this topic, the sources have to come from Torah. That is, although we need to elucidate a topic which involves intimacy, discussions will be exclusively based on the words of Torah and Chazal as they are found in the Talmud and other Torah sources. You have to rely on sources from the Torah. When I was a chassan, when I was a groom, I called my Rosh Hashiva. Our Shiva was known to give a couple of private talks to us, one or two conversations. We would discuss these issues. He made me go and get a Gemara Shabbos. He didn't just tell me this is what the Gemara Shabbos says. He felt, and this is my understanding of what he did. He wanted to make sure that I wouldn't have terrible thoughts about this. I had a Gemara, the Kedusha of a Gemara in my hand, and I saw it inside. I think that's what he was doing. Maybe he thought I would think that it's not in the Gemara. I happen to have learned the Gemara many times, the Gemara on Shabbos, where it discusses some private things, how a woman should excite a man in the bedroom. The Gemara talks about it briefly. So he felt that it's important that it should come from the Torah, because if you say it's just coming from regular knowledge, just have a regular casual conversation about this, it can lose its sense of kedusha. Again, the Yetzer Hara. This is something that the book talks about a lot. Is about fighting the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara, apparently, we think just wants us to have lust and desire for this thing, and without any boundaries. And that could be part of the Yetzer Hara, without any boundaries. We have to know to put the right boundaries in there. And then the second lesson, the lessons must present only general principles that are relevant to all people, and not specific details, even if they are relevant to all people. I've read part of this book. I've looked at part of this book, and I have a big problem with the second lesson. I have a problem with the first principle, and I have a really big problem with the second principle. He says that you can't talk about specific details, only about general concepts. So, for those people who have any knowledge about what goes on in the bedroom, I think it's really important to talk about specific details, because that could really make or break the relationship. People who are in a monogamous relationship for a long time, this is one of the things I want to talk about in this book, is that there are certain things which are talked about a lot when it comes to marital intimacy, when it comes to sex, that are relevant in a short-term relationship, maybe when people are dating or something like that, in the beginning of a marriage. Over time of a marriage, when you have to keep on being together with the same person. This is really true much more for a man than for a woman. Women, if they have a good husband that they love, and that's a real man, they don't need anybody else. That's the truth. The Gemara says that, right, a woman can't be married to two men. She can't technically, it's not Kedusha, it's not Tosa by two men. She can't be in a relationship with two men at the same time. A man, though. The Gemara is full of them. Mesachas Yevamos and Ksuvos, Yaakov Avinu, all the Avos, they had multiple wives. A man, and this is a problem with all society, I believe, monogamy is a mistake. It was a Takanas Rabbeinu Gershom that was enacted about more than 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years have passed. I think it's over. I think it should be over. Men, no matter how beautiful or how lovely their wife is, they will get sick of her after a very short amount of time. Doesn't mean they want to get rid of her, but they have to have variety. At least I spoke to one guy. He's like, yeah, we need at least 3 wives. You need at least 3 wives. Now, the truth is that it's a big responsibility. Even to have 1 wife, most men can't even handle 1 wife. To have 3 wives would be really hard to handle, especially if they all have children from them. So it's very difficult. But it's important to know that a man wants variety in the bedroom, and that's just in terms of different women. But if you're going to remain in the same monogamous relationship, I think it's very unhealthy for men. But if you're going to remain in that relationship, things have to change in the bedroom. You have to have nuances and different things, and that relates to specific details in the marriage. There's different positions. There's different things each partner can do for each other, which are so important, and you have to change it up, and you have to have excitement. That contributes to the excitement in the bedroom. If you don't know specific details, you just talk about things in a general way. A general way. Okay, before we're physically together, before we have intimacy, intercourse, we should talk a little bit, laugh a little bit, joke a little bit, and then some foreplay, and then do the final act, and then it's over. Then we go to sleep. I think that's maybe good for the first night, a couple of nights of marriage, but after a longer marriage, you have to talk about specific details, um, and people have fetishes, people have things they enjoy and they want to enjoy, um, and a lot of the Talmud, back to the first point, that everything has to come from the words of the Talmud or the Gemara. I think this is a mistake because a lot of times we don't understand Chazal. Most of these Gemaras and Chazals are part of Agadita, which is basically things which we don't understand the real words of Chazal, the depths of the words of Chazal. We rely on some of the explanations of the Rishonim, of Rashi or the Maharsha, the explanations. And to say that's the only thing there is a big mistake, because there could be other explanations of that. There's deeper explanations in the Talmud. So I think it's very important to, instead of starting from the words of Chazal, to start from people who are knowledgeable with what goes on in the bedroom, what makes a man happy in the bedroom, what makes a woman happy in the bedroom. And if you don't know those things, you have to talk about it from a natural perspective. I think that's the most important thing, is to figure out naturally what man likes, what woman likes, and how to go about having a successful relationship where both people get not just their needs taken care of, but also their wants taken care of. Because the most important want there is, right? There's needs. If needs are not taken care of, then it'll destroy your marriage. But if you have wants, there's one thing I think in the world where if you don't get your wants, your life will be destroyed also, and that's in the bedroom also, with sex and things like that. Because this means the most to everybody. Everybody knows it means the most to everything, much more than anything else, because ultimately the purpose of life, is to enjoy life. That's what we want. We want to find happiness, and even more than happiness, enjoyment. If you don't believe that that's supposed to be an Olam Haba, but technically I've explained that the way to get to Olam Haba, which is through the body, physical enjoyment of the body, you have to, acclimate to it in this world also. So that's the most important part. So I think your wants have to be taken care of also, especially in the bedroom. So you have to, and the way to talk about that is to talk about what men and women would want, and that's not. And Chazal is very ambiguous. They don't talk about most things in the bedroom. It's not talked about. So you can use Chazal, what it says in the words of the Torah, to buttress a point, or maybe to nuance a point. But you have to talk about from a natural perspective what men want, what women want, and that's very important. The last thing I want to talk about in this introduction is that he divides this book into 10 lessons. In a number of these lessons, like let's say lesson number 2, marital intimacy is the greatest expression of a couple's unity. In lesson number 1, he says, we will discover that Shalom Bayis is not merely a state that allows a couple to live together. Fighting is a revelation of a couple's inner unity, which allows a beautiful harmony to blossom in their home. Again, the author seems to think that the point of marital intimacy is the highest form of unity between the couple. And that's why people get married. Like he said before, people get married for the bedroom, for sex. That's what they get married for. But he's really defining the point of sex and being together is unity, to bond together. And I think that's a big mistake. I think that's a huge mistake. In a certain sense, everything in life is a business partnership. In a certain sense, when you do business with someone, you make a business deal. You do a deal that's advantageous to both of you. That's why you do the deal, unless one person's ripping the other person off. You want to do a deal, you buy a property, you want the property, the other person needs the cash, So you're making a deal which is advantageous to both people. And I think marriage is like that also. We don't like to think about it, the man has his chores, the woman has hers chores. But practically, that's how you have to think of it. Yes, there is something called love, which I'm saying is part of the picture. Love, an emotion for a woman that's sorely important. And the way love is expressed is through the physical acts in the bedroom. You make love. That's what it's called, making love. If it's done in a soft and caressing manner by the man, that will instill feelings in his wife. Of course, you're supposed to say to your wife a lot of times, you love you, you're beautiful. Those things are very important. But the way the sex is done gives a woman a feeling of love. That's very important, to love to a woman more than so than to a man. Of course, a man also would love that his wife would love him, but to a woman, that's the essence. That's the highest thing. That's the most important thing to her. But the point is not unity, bring them together. I don't think there's, exactly, you're supposed to be one. Now we talk about all the hashkafa, your basher, you're missing half of you and things like that. I think that's really relevant to finding your zivug. And I've mentioned in The Real Me that I don't think most people's marriages is their zivug. Kachka kriyas yam, it's hard to find your zivug. So at the end of the day, we have to be practical and say that really marriage, just like the rest of their marriage, is sort of a partnership. There should be emotion of love. That's part of the partnership. And bedroom, a man and woman have to take care of each other's needs, and you have to be cognizant of each other's needs. It's not about unity so much, because a man has specific things he likes in the bedroom, and a woman has certain things she likes in the bedroom. And it could take a while before you find a perfect equilibrium of what makes it's good for both of you in the bedroom. You have to know what's good for both of you. One person shouldn't be taxed more than the other one. It should be a fair relationship in the bedroom. It shouldn't be the man's doing everything for the woman's doing everything for the man, and the man's getting everything they want, the woman's getting everything they want, the other one's not getting what they want, because that's a problem. It happens very often. We'll talk more about that in the book, but it's not unity. That's not the point of sex. That's why I said you shouldn't just look at Chazals and say, oh, shalom bayis, so that's the essence of marriage, or shalom, or these things, and make it agadata and make it exegesis over here and start talking about spiritual things. Because once you inject spirituality into it here, you're missing the point over here. It's a physical act, and that's what it's supposed to be. There is emotion over here, and emotion is also part of the physicality. So you have to really view it from, we don't like to say it's a business. It's not really a business partnership, but in everything in life, you have to be fair with other people. Asisa yashar atov, it says in the Torah. You should look for enjoyment, which is good, atov, and yashar. You have to be fair. Marriage is a relationship. You have to be fair to the other spouse. You have to know, and if you try to find out what their spouse wants, or have them tell you, or you tell the others, make sure to be clear with the other spouse what you want. A lot of people that have never been together, especially in the ultra-Orthodox world, they've never touched a woman, they've never been, intimate before. In the first night of the marriage, it's like a complete, shock to some people. They didn't even know they were going to have to do this, like uncover parts of the body they have to uncover. They didn't know. They didn't even realize. Some people don't even know. I've heard stories about, there was a story of a Hasidic couple that she thought you penetrate the belly button, that he should penetrate into the belly button. It was it's a kind of a funny story, but people don't. How are you supposed to know about these things if you're completely cut off from the other sex from the age of 3 years old? You don't hear about them. You don't talk to them. In some Hasidic families, the woman won't even sit at the same table with men. They'll go into the kitchen and eat in the kitchen. This is common in a lot of households. So they'll completely avoid each other, even if you're family and things like that. So you don't really know the other person at all, and it's a very uncomfortable relationship, even just talking to them, let alone being the most, letting the biggest secrets of yourself being exposed to the other person, namely your body and your emotions and your feelings. And that's everything is brought to the surface in a sexual relationship. And in marriage, we're talking about, this is about marriage, we're not talking about this book about sexual relationships, casual sex, or sexual relationships outside of the rubric of marriage. But in terms of marriage itself, the point is not unity. The point, I think, is on a practical level, has to be what each person expects, what each person wants. You have to find that out. If you're a fair husband or a fair wife, you try to find that out and make the other person happy as much as possible. And a happy wife is a happy life. They don't have a phrase about a happy husband, but a happy husband, I don't know. Also, he has to be happy also, the husband. So it has to be fair for both of them. They should be tuned to what they want, what they need, and express. It's very important to have good communication. Express to their spouse. They can't know. They're not prophets. They should try to figure out the other spouse, but if they can't figure it out, you should tell them exactly what you need. Women like it when men tell them, this is what I want, Women, it's hard for them to open their mouths, but usually it's the woman that's telling the man what they want, and the man is not opening his mouth. Usually, we'll talk more about this, but really, women get in a fair relationship where it's a good husband. The women get what they want. The men don't always get what they want. That's part of the problem with monogamy. We'll talk more about that going forward. Hope you enjoyed today's introduction. See you next week. Chapter 1 coming up next week. See you there.